Okay, fair enough. So I kind of got off track there, but I kind of want to circle it back around to obviously what we started talking about, and it just has to do with I guess women being discriminated against in general, and I think about I guess was it Fannie Willis, the DA in Atlanta or Georgia, something like
Somewhere, I
that.
think Fulton County,
Okay,
somewhere in
yeah.
Georgia. Yeah.
So I haven't heard much about. I've been following it a little bit, but obviously, the whole case against Donald Trump and I think the influence, trying to influence the election for the votes, and one of many cases that were pending, just with the whole election cycle thing. So I kind of wanted to just discuss. I guess is it more of on Trump and just his circle of influence, or is it more of just obviously this woman in general? I've seen it all over Fox News. I've seen it all over the news, where maybe it's because she was trying him the hardest, where she's getting all this flack against her for just the case in general about people saying it's a hoax, this, that, and the other. So I kind of just wanted to get your opinion on that whole situation.
Yeah, I think that's a good. I think that's a good question. I think it's a good topic to circle back to, and I want to start by saying I absolutely do not think that this is a Trump thing. I feel like this is an American culture thing, and again, not to beat up on the American culture because there are definitely other cultures where women have even fewer rights than we do,
Right.
in the United States, both on the books and just in interpretation.
Yeah.
But what I will say, and I think you can look to any platform and find this to be consistent, what I will say is that women are held to a different and sometimes unreasonable what do I want to say? So standard, an unreasonable standard, and I think a lot of times in the same spaces, men will get a pass. Why is that? Again, if we're saying that most of these spaces are in one way or another primarily influenced by men, it's not an indictment on men to say that the outcome is women's thoughts and needs and wants and ideas and rights get left off because we're not even at the table to be able to interject. Hey, and the times that we are at the table, a lot of times there's one of us, right? And so now you've got to make a very smart judgment as to whether you want to be that catalyst,
Yeah.
and sometimes the X catalyst because the squeaky wheel can be removed and replaced with a wheel that does not squeak. If you understand
Oh
what
yeah.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
So sometimes the squeaky wheel will get the grease. Sometimes the squeaky wheel will get removed. And so when you're whether you're the only woman, the only person of color, whatever it is, it makes it difficult in that moment for you to push back on something that you know to be non-inclusive. Um, so I feel like all of that plays into it. I do think that in terms of Donald Trump, since you mentioned him specifically, I do think that he is benefiting from a culture that is very patriarchal. I will say that. I think since we're on the topic, I think he's also benefiting from a culture that leans very white supremacy aspirant. I will say that.
Okay.
And so the fact that this person and people like him and people around him are able to capitalize on the culture does not mean we can blame them for the culture that we're existing in now.
Okay.
If that makes sense. It's going to take everybody. Like, I don't think that Donald Trump can call a press conference and say, hey, just want to let y'all know, as far as the United States is concerned, since I'm about to be the president of this country, I just want y'all to know that we're no longer going to be misogynistic and, we're going to cut out all that patriarchy and we're not going to be racist and oppressive to any groups. I mean, he could say it. I think it would send quite a few people to the nut house immediately. But, the reality is that is not something you can force on someone just by speaking it. Because if that was the case, we wouldn't be dealing with any of that in 2024.
Well, yeah. And, it kind of reminds me of almost like juries, and you've heard about this in, I always think about To Kill a Mockingbird, and it was supposed to be a jury of his peers, and of course, this was in what was it, the 30s or 40s. It's supposed to be set in like the mid 1900s, and of course, the movie came out after the book. And I always think about the jury that's just, it's an all white, all male jury that is trying this black man for doing something that basically there was no evidence against. And basically, like in a Perry Mason movie or a Perry Mason TV show, she all but admitted to she lied, and they still convicted this man. And I feel like that's kind of what you're looking at when you go even to, like you said, about government. So if we're all sitting on this board or we're sitting on this panel and you're the one woman, the one person of color, or if you're that one black person that's on a jury and you see things a different way than everybody else, it's going to be nearly impossible, very nearly impossible to get the other 11 people to see things from your perspective, because they basically already have their own perspective. Depending on what case you're looking at, I think if it's against, if it's the Ku Klux Klan or whatever, I mean, there have been cases where even then, going 50, 60 years ago, where they would get off just because they're like, yeah, I don't see the issue with that. You still see that in today's society, and that's kind of what I feel like a lot of people don't see. But at the same time, I feel like they do, and that's why people are so scared of having immigrants come in, having certain people, especially people of color, be in positions of power, because they see it as, oh, well, now we don't have a say, or they're going against our way, where it's always been, going back to what I said the other day, 99% against the 1%. But if you have 99%, I feel like being inclusive really shouldn't affect you unless you're scared that 50, 60 years from now, you'll be the new minority. And even then, you really shouldn't be afraid of what's to come, because if you do right by people, it really shouldn't matter. And I feel like I see that a lot in work, just when I go to work or whatever. If you do right by me, I don't care what color you are. If you do right by me, I'm going to do right by you, because then we're not having to see color. But if I can see, like we always talk about, just these blatant biases, I'm going to feel some type of way if I'm put in the same position. I definitely wouldn't react the same way that you would, but I will remember that, and I want to make sure that that doesn't happen again. So maybe I will overcorrect, things of that nature. I think about apartheid. Like, a lot of people were just on that because they're like, hey, they're over there, they're this, we're over here, we're this, just separate but equal. But when you have to share a space, and you even see that today with Israel on the Gaza Strip, if you have to share a space and one side feels like they're not included, no matter what side you see is right or wrong, there are going to be issues there.